My contact at New Type HQ hit me up and wanted to know if I was willing to try out splash paints, and I'm always willing to try out free paint because I go through this stuff quite quickly. Splash, from what I could tell, is fairly new to my radar. I've known about them for the past year. I've picked up a couple clears, a bit of paint, mostly the mecha colors. At the time being, I wouldn't mind grabbing some more. But Splash themselves sent me some surfacer, matty coat, and so on and so forth. You may have seen my paint job before on my most recent Zaku 2.0 build with the Anchor T/LYJ. It's so hard to remember these acronyms. I used a bit of the darker Zaku green in some of my color shading, so the more you know. I feel splash paints are a very interesting paint, to say the least, simply because I think it's geared towards people that are more experienced as painters, car painters and so on and so forth, guys that have years of just know-how and skill, because I find the paint to be a little thin. Now, this isn't exactly an issue for me. I used a Mr. Supreme airbrush with a 0.18mm nozzle. This is basically made in the same factory as the Iwata. It's a cheaper custom micron. Custom microns are usually around $500-600. And now, due to the pandemic, even the Mr. Supreme airbrush is now shot up to $400. So I'm glad I got it when I did. Jesus Christ, did the price go up on this thing? Don't even bother getting it now. Don't bother getting this airbrush. It's as high as $600. Good Lord, did the price skyrocket. Well, anyway, since this paint is very thin, I knew it would work very well with this airbrush specifically because it loves very thin paints. But if you're not using something like this, it could be a bit of an issue. And if you don't have any sort of finesse with your airbrush, if you don't have much finger control of your airbrush, this paint could be a pain in the ass for you. Not gonna lie. If you spray hard, it'll spiderweb on you. It just splashes out, honestly. Good name. But if you, careful with it and you're painting slowly with a bit more diligence and precision, you'll find no issues with this paint. I like the tones completely. I think this is good airbrush paint. It just might be very thin for some people depending on the airbrush you use. But if you're using something like a custom micron or a Mr. Supreme airbrush, this is the perfect paint because it's going to work in tandem with that tiny needle that normally can barely handle anything outside of water. I also use their primer. It's all right. I haven't got a major opinion on it because I'm kind of biased. I've been using Mr. Surfacer for years, and I don't know if I'd switch it up too much. But I will say that their primer, probably, if you're going to paint a clear coat and you want it to be super glossy, you're going to have to sand it, wet sand the primer, in my personal opinion, because it's very rough. I like my primers to be more fine. Now, this is not an issue if you're doing flat or matty coats, but if you're doing glossy coats and you have a rough surface primer and you just paint over it without any sort of prep on it, then your clear coat for the glossy clear is going to look a little bit like orange peel. A lot of people can't tell the difference. It's something you pick up if you spend enough time painting, wasting your life away. All the time I've spent learning how to paint, it's not a major skill for me personally. If I was making real money, it would make sense. As you can see, these spoons are very beautiful. The colors are great. By the way, these white spoons, do not use them to buff colors. If I ever use these white spoons for colors again, I will never buff a clear coat on them because they're bendy and flexy and the paint just comes off. All right, Splash also sent me some matty clears, well, matte clear. I also have my own 2K clear and their 1K clear. I don't see them selling it anymore, the 1K clear. And I guess it kind of makes sense, because most people are probably interested in the 2K clear, to be honest with you. I know I am. Now, the thing is with the 2K clears, whether it's matte or gloss coat, these are urethanes, you're going to have to mix them. It's a 3-to-1 ratio. What that means, it's always 3 times the amount of paint to 1 of the hardener / activator / crystalline, whatever they call it. If you have a different name for it, it's all the same, okay? So don't get confused. You're going to need these little medicine cups. You can find them off Amazon. Gundam, where's the link? I don't know. I bought them a year or more ago. I will also say that if you're using the medicine cup method, be sure you got a lot of stuff to paint. I learned the hard way that I put way too much in here, thinking I was only using a little bit, only to be dismayed to find out that I have mixed a lot of paint. And with this stuff, you really want to make sure that you're only mixing what you're going to use, because once you put the hardener in it, that's it. This stuff has to be used. If it isn't used, you're going to have to throw it away. And for me, it sucks to throw away perfectly good paint. I wish I had something lying around that I could have clear coated or that I wanted ultra glossy clear. After the coats have been laid down, we're going to try out Tamiya's rubbing compounds as well as Meguiar's. I trust Meguiar's with urethanes. When you're doing this, you're going to have to do some wet sanding. It's inevitable. I would recommend, personally, the way I do urethane usually is 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. 4 if you really want, but 3 is probably the max. I found, oddly enough, that the Tamiya yielded the same results as the Meguiar's, but with Tamiya, there was more steps to get to where you could, like, there's 4 steps for Tamiya. With Meguiar's, you could achieve the same results in 3. This all depends on you and the price. The Tamiya paint kit or the Tamiya stuff, it's cheaper. Meguiar's, you're probably going to spend a few bucks, 40, 50, I'd say. So once again, really depends on you. On top of that, it didn't occur to me to use my 4,000 grit liquid and my 8,000. Why didn't I? You'll notice that some of my spoons chipped. That's because they were bendy. I'm an idiot. I really heavy-handed this. And I ended up ruining my paint jobs in 2 days of, paint work. You paint the stuff and you wait almost 48 hours for it to cure. By the way, the curing time is what sucks the most. Some people say get a dehydrator. That could work. Others say a dehumidifier. I haven't tried it, though, because I worry the plastic would melt at the recommended heat they say you need to use for an hour in order to cure it properly. So I just leave them out. Overall verdict. The matte finish looks a bit more satin to me. Not a bad thing. I could use a satin paint now that I no longer touch anything from Alkali clears. I will say the 2K glossy coat is the one that won me over. I love this stuff. It's exactly what I want in a glossy coat. It is so hard to achieve this sort of finish for me personally with Mr. Hobby clears and Guyano clears. This is where it's at for me. I love this stuff. I will definitely use it on future projects. And on top of that, you don't necessarily have to sand and buff the glossy clear with splash paints, which is impressive if you have a good base. If you either A, sand down their primer, or B, if you use like a 1500 grit primer from Mr. Hobby and then paint over it for smoother surfaces. If your base is, smooth, then the glossy clear coat probably won't need any prep work at all. You could get away technically without sanding and then buffing for at least 30 minutes on one part. Food for thought, especially for people who are lazy or want to maximize their time while painting. If you don't mind doing all the extra steps of buffing and whatnot, even better. It looks so much more mirror finishy than it already does. Fantastic. I love the 2K clear. Love it. And that's just my opinion. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to trust me. Maybe you had different experiences, but so far, this stuff I like. Bar none. Thank you, Splash Paints and New Type HQ, for sending me stuff to sample. Love it.